and 63 in Irvine. We lead local from the KFI 24-hour newsroom. I'm Brian Berumen.
Checking KFI traffic, we do have a crash in the Culver City area, 405 northbound before the 90. That is blocking the right lane. Full closure in Fountain Valley on the 405 southbound from Magnolia to Water. All lanes shut down until 8:30 a.m. And also we have a closure at Westminster, 405 southbound from the 22 to Springdale. All lanes closed until 8 a.m. New Buena Park on the 5 northbound to 91. Crash there blocking the right lane. KFI in the Sky helps get you there faster. I'm Jonathan Weiss.
I know you've seen all those great home loans being advertised, but you're probably not sure if you qualify. Or maybe you've been told, nope, you can't get that low rate. Well, I bet you haven't called IntelliLoan. Right now, IntelliLoan has a 1.99% rate in APR with no points or lender fees for SoCal residents. And this is even if your credit score is as low as 620. It's a 1.99% rate in APR with no points and no lender fees. And you've heard me talk about Daryl, the owner of IntelliLoan. He's got a team of home loan specialists that really want to make this home loan process not suck. They want to make it as hassle-free as possible for you. So call IntelliLoan today at 1-800-918-6200. That's 1-800-918-6200, or just go to IntelliLoan.com.
Rates subject to change without notice. Minimum loan amount requirements apply. 60% loan to value and 620 FICO credit score. Certain restrictions apply. Subject to credit approval. NMLS 3290. Loans made or arranged pursuant to a California Finance Lenders Law License number 6036970. Equal housing lender. IntelliLoan. Borrow smart.
Wendy's Frosty-Chino is cold brew with frosty creamer. So wake up with a breakfast baconator, seasoned potatoes, and a little frosty in your coffee. And make your good morning great, because Wendy's Frosty-Chino is cold brew with frosty creamer. Choose wisely. Choose Wendy's. A participating U.S. Wendy's.
Find the employees you need to get your business moving. Sign up with iHeartAdBuilder.com and create a custom radio ad to reach job seekers listening to stations just like this one. Get started today at iHeartAdBuilder.com.
As a Hall of Fame running back, Eric Dickerson knows a winner when he sees one.
You got that right.
So he drives a Ford F-150.
It's my favorite truck, hands down.
And for 2021, the Ford F-150 is all new, with an available hybrid powertrain and onboard generator.
Really? Can I get one of those?
I will try.
Okay, cool.
In the meantime, come and test drive the new F-150 at the place where Eric Dickerson's getting his.
At your Southern California Ford dealers.
Graduating from high school can leave you with a lot of questions about your future. You can find answers to those questions at a California community college. So don't wait. Enroll now for the fall semester. Online and in-person classes are available with year-round financial aid to help. Plus, with guaranteed transfer to a safe spot at a four-year university, and hundreds of career programs to choose from, your future is looking brighter than ever. Classes can fill up quickly, so grab your spot now. Visit stayenrolled.com today.
Contractor license 1047-781.
In a desert climate like this one, air conditioners last only about 11 years.
That's still a long time if you compare it to the life of a computer or the average car.
The way to make your car last longer is to change the oil.
How do you make air conditioners last longer?
Get an annual rejuvenation from Gettle.
If you've got one of the old ACs that use Freon, you're going to need to replace that because it's illegal to manufacture or import Freon to the U.S. these days.
You know what I'm going to do for just $129?
What?
I'm going to send America's best AC tech to make 6 critical adjustments to bring that air conditioner back to factory specs.
We got to clean those outside coils while we're there.
You bet. And we're going to clean them the right way, not the easy way.
That's $129 you'll ever spend.
A Gettle rejuvenation makes your system cool better and faster so that your home uses less energy and has fewer breakdowns.
Gettle. It rhymes with kettle, except it starts with a G and it's spelled really weird.
Gettle. G-O-E-T-T-L.
Will keep you cool, but it's hard to spell.
Newt Gingrich here, and I'd like to invite you to listen to my podcast, Newt's World. Most people know me as the former Speaker of the House, but I'm also a historian with a wide range of interests. I enjoy talking with experts in their field and the most interesting people across a variety of subjects. I release 4 episodes of Newt's World every week with an effort to excite the imagination of our audience, and hopefully you'll learn something new each time you listen. Listen and subscribe for free to Newt's World on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Good morning, everyone. This is KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. Don't forget that you can catch KFI everywhere and anytime on the iHeartRadio app. My name is Oscar Ramirez, and I'm the host of The Daily Dive. a daily news podcast covering some of the top stories making waves in the news. You can catch a new episode of The Daily Dive Monday through Friday in iHeartRadio, and it's ready for you when you wake up. Here on the Daily Dive Weekend Edition, I'll be bringing you some of the best stories I covered during the week. This week we followed the story of JBS, the second largest producer of beef, pork, and chicken, who's now fully operational after being the victim of a ransomware attack by a Russian group named R-Evil. Luckily, the disruption to the food supply will be minimal, but workers going back had to put in some good old-fashioned manual labor, as many of the operations at these plants are automated. For more on this latest ransomware attack on critical sectors of the U.S. economy, we'll speak to Elizabeth Elkin, agriculture reporter at Bloomberg News.
At least some plants, we've heard, were doing operations manually. And so that means that logistical labor like packaging and accounting for cattle could be a challenge. One union rep told me that he'd compare it to driving manual while you're ramping up to get the car back into full auto, right? Everything from like knife sharpening to production line speed all rely heavily on automation for their control. And so with a cyber attack like this, like that can be a huge challenge. And, you know, we saw all of their beef plants in the U.S. had to shut down on Tuesday, which is just huge, right? Like you said, I mean, they're a huge producer of meat, the largest meat producer globally, and they supply almost a quarter of American beef supplies. So that is, I mean, it's huge, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah, you know, the extent of these outages and how much it's going to affect them, we probably won't know. JBS is probably not going to disclose all of that. But some of the workers returning were, you know, there was concerns about meat sitting in freezers for too long. It could render it inedible. So we don't know exactly what has been lost in the last few days that they had been closed.
No, we don't. And, you know, if you think about this on a larger scale, right, we had huge closures during COVID. And if you compare that to this is a pretty small blip, right, compared to like COVID closures, but it was big, and it's, you know, big that this humongous meat company had to shut down over this.
Yeah, the prices of meat have been impacted, you know, a little bit. We'll see how much, you know, the after effects, we'll have to kind of wait and see, but so far the prices have been affected. A little bit more on the actual ransomware attack itself. The FBI has said that it's been attributed to a Russian-speaking gang, R-Evil, pretty sinister name there. But what else do we know about this? We don't know if JBS paid a ransom, how much that might have been. You know, what do we know about that attack specifically?
We don't know a lot, which has been, I think, frustrating for a lot of people. JBS has been pretty quiet about updates, and we again asked them for any updates that they might have today and haven't received any. We're in a waiting game. We, like you said, we don't know whether they paid the ransom. We don't know really any details about that beyond just that the FBI has come out and confirmed that it was this Russia-linked group.
I think in this case, some of the backup servers were not affected. That's kind of how they were able to get back up so quickly, thankfully, right? I think some reporting I saw said back in October, there was a representative from this gang, R-Evil, who said that the agriculture sector would now be a main target for them. And obviously we see that now, and we saw with the Colonial Pipeline hack, bigger infrastructure areas are being targets for this ransomware attacks. And that's the concern, that attacks like this will grow. And really the cybersecurity setup in a lot of these companies just isn't up to protecting themselves from these attacks.
This really upended the agriculture market, and it did raise a lot of concerns about food security. We're seeing, like you said, increasing targets of this critical infrastructure. And yeah, wholesale meat prices are at the highest level since the early days of the pandemic last year. Cattle futures swung wildly. This is really a concern, and the White House did come out and say that corporate leaders should immediately develop plans to try to counter these attacks, like offline backups to critical information. And there are no Department of Agriculture cybersecurity regulations or requirements for meat packers, we've discovered.
What are we hearing from employees? I know JBS said that there wasn't evidence that any customer or supplier or worker data had been leaked, but that's always the concern when servers and things are attacked like that.
Absolutely, and we've been hearing a lot from employees that they are really concerned about this. And I mean, if you were an employee there, I'm sure that this would be a concern for you too. We're hearing, about some of those challenges that people have faced as they go in, like we discussed, some of the things that are having to be done manually that usually wouldn't be. Now, most of the plants are back up and running, pretty good capacity. And I know that we have been in touch with like unions, looking at, as they're trying to get people back in the door here, like what does that look like? There's some concern, but also pretty much everyone who I've spoken with thinks that, JBS will be able to come back up to full capacity of doing all of the things that they usually do. And other companies have kind of been encouraged to come in and help fill this gap.
Elizabeth Elkin, agriculture reporter at Bloomberg News. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks again for having me.
The housing market in the country continues to be as crazy as ever, with low inventory and sky-high prices. But thousands of homes, known as whisper listings or pocket listings, are being reserved for certain buyers, and it's squeezing the supply even tighter. In some cases, brokers may show an unlisted home to a small circle of buyers before publicly advertising that listing. This all just means that the dwindling option for home buyers continues. For more on all of this, we'll speak to Nicole Friedman, housing reporter at the Wall Street Journal.
Normally, to buy or sell a home, the seller will list their house publicly. So they'll put it on multiple listing service, kind of a local database that has all of the house listings, and then from there it will go on to, Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com, all of these websites, so that any buyer can see the home. There will also be a for sale sign out front, lots of marketing. And the idea is to get, as many buyers as possible who want to tour the home and make offers. And especially in this market, it is super competitive out there for buyers. Buyers are desperate to buy homes, and there just aren't enough on the market. So any home that does go on the market these days is likely to sell very quickly and get multiple offers. But in some cases, brokerages are not putting listings on those public databases, but they're keeping them kind of in-house. It's called an office exclusive, also called a pocket listing, where a brokerage might have a house that they only market to other agents inside that brokerage. And there are various reasons that sellers might want to do this. It's a little bit more common in high-end markets. If a seller is, say, a celebrity or somebody who has a lot of privacy or safety concerns, they might not want all of these people touring their house. They might not want photos of their house on the internet. So sometimes sellers prefer these kind of more private listing options. And that means that the house is kind of only advertised within a certain brokerage, and so only clients of that brokerage get access to these listings. But what that also means is that a buyer who is looking for a house to buy and going on these websites every day trying to find new houses on the market might hear, oh wow, this house that completely fits my criteria just sold, and I didn't even know it was for sale. I didn't even get a chance to look or to make an offer. Let's put some numbers to it, because these pocket listings accounted for about 3% of sales on average for the past year that ended in March. 3% is not that much, but that's about 169,000 homes. That's a lot of homes. Right. So it is not, to be clear, the entirety of the inventory problem, right? There really is a shortage of houses, and it is not only that if all of these houses were listed publicly, there would be enough houses. There is a long-standing shortage of homes, and this is just kind of one small corner of the market that is these houses that are being sold kind of more privately, but it does account, as you said, for about 3% of the market, so that's not a huge proportion, but it is up from the year before and the year before that, so it is kind of rising in this more competitive market. I guess that was Freddie Mac estimated that the housing market is short nearly 4 million homes. That is a ton of homes that people are looking for right now. Absolutely, and so really the bigger issue is that for the past decade, home builders have not really kept up with long-term demand, and so there's this big deficit of houses that people are ready to buy that just haven't been built yet. So what is this all doing? I mentioned also that the home prices are at record highs right now. We kind of saw the first slowing of the pace of these purchases, but it's because house prices are so high and it's pushing some buyers out. Yeah, so definitely affordability is a growing problem right now in the market, that house prices are being pushed to record highs because there's so many buyers competing for so few houses, and so buyers are just outbidding each other. And it's getting really difficult for first-time buyers, buyers in the lower end of the market, to afford homes. People are getting priced out. So that's a growing problem, but right now the demand is just so strong that even if some people are getting priced out of the market, there's still more buyers there ready to take their place. Nicole Friedman, housing reporter at the Wall Street Journal. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for having me.
You're listening to the Daily Dive Weekend Edition on KFI AM 640 and everywhere in the iHeartRadio app. When we come back, we'll talk about COVID-19 origins and how the Wuhan lab leak theory continues to be in the news.
In California, we all deserve access to fair employment. You can't be denied a job because of your race, birthplace, or who you love. You can't be paid less because of your gender, religion, or disability. If you're an employer, help keep California fair for everyone. Learn more at dfeh.ca.gov. Sponsored by California Department of Fair Employment and Housing. Aired by the California Broadcasters Association.
Hey California, did you hear about the big vaccine incentives program? You Call the Shot California gets $50 incentive cards for things like groceries or shopping at your favorite small business to the next 2 million Californians who begin and complete their vaccination against COVID-19. Make that vaccine appointment today at myturn.ca.gov or call 833-422-4255. Get vaxxed for the win, people. It's a win-win for you and California. Vaccinated Californians ages 12 and up are eligible. Visit covid19.ca.gov to learn more.
Thinking of buying a house and want a really low interest rate? Owning has a special for home purchases, where Owning pays all your closing costs, and the rate in APR is an unheard of 1.875% for a 15-year fixed mortgage with 20% down. This is the craziest low rate for a mortgage with no closing costs that Owning has ever done. 1.875% rate in APR. Heck, we're almost paying you to live in a new house. Call 833-2-OWNING or go to owning.com to see if you qualify for this crazy low 1.875% rate. That's a fixed rate loan at 1.875% with no closing costs. Call 833-2-OWNING now because 1.875 could go away at any time.
NMLS 2611, licensed by the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation under the California Residential Mortgage Lending Act. Subject to credit approval. Offer assumes the use of lender's choice escrow and title services. Call 833-858-0066 for terms and conditions.
That's 833-2-OWNING or owning.com. 833-2-OWNING or owning.com. Neil Saavedra here. About 3 years ago, my wife and I called American Vision Windows. They installed gorgeous French doors for us, changed the flow of our home, added architectural appeal. The next project they're doing, our kitchen windows. We can't wait. Their work is meticulous. It's outstanding. I recommended them to my brother, Craig, and now he and his family have a lovely window encased patio, added 150 sunny square feet to their home. We all know Bill and Kathleen's story. They had a horrible experience replacing their own windows. They started their own company. Fast forward 20 years later, they continue to beautify homes like mine with personal care, complete professionalism, and attention. CSLB number 778326. Give you and your home the gift of light, warmth, and beauty. Trust the window company my family trusts. American Vision Windows. You'll see the difference. Call American Vision Windows today for that free estimate, 888-226-9908. That's 888-226-9908. Or for specials, visit AmericanVisionWindows.com.
Yes, I know. I have a calming demeanor. You know, when it's your job basically to push people beyond their comfort zones, it's good to make them feel as safe as possible. Like an open heart surgeon for your home. You'll do fine. No worries. We got it.
Home with Dean Sharp, the House Whisperer, this morning at 9 on KFI AM 640.
More stimulating talk.
This is KFI AM 640. I'm Oscar Ramirez, and you're listening to the Daily Dive Weekend Edition. Also this week, still getting a lot of play, is the coronavirus lab leak theory. Recently, we found out that 3 researchers at the Wuhan Institute of Virology got sick in November of 2019 and sought treatment at a hospital. Their symptoms were consistent with COVID and common seasonal illnesses. Also being talked about in this conversation was an abandoned Chinese mine where people got sick after clearing out bat guano. Scientists from the Wuhan Institute took samples there and found several new coronaviruses in 2012. Calls to investigate the coronavirus origins have intensified as China continues to limit information. For more on all of this, we'll speak to Ken Delanian, National Security Correspondent at NBC News.
It's getting more play now because actually the facts on the ground have not changed much. But what's happened is, you had the Trump administration, the China bashing, hot rhetoric Trump administration saying a lot of this stuff, and it was discounted. Often, in many circles, it was discounted. But in fact, right from the beginning, my U.S. intelligence sources were very skeptical about the origins of this because they said to themselves, look, these coronaviruses come from bats that generally are in caves 1,000 miles from Wuhan. But somehow, this virus first arose in the human population in Wuhan, which just happens to be the center of biological research in China, and just happens to be the location of the only sort of high-level lab where they're doing that, really, high-end research where they wear the crazy suits that we've seen in the movies. And so that's the circumstantial case, right? And then they saw that China was covering up, was obfuscating. And then when they asked for data and information about what was going on in the lab, they weren't getting it. And so now a lot of scientists initially discounted the notion that there could have been, and by the way, we're talking about an accidental release from the lab. No serious authority that I know alleges that this was somehow a bioweapon. The prevailing theory is that they were studying coronaviruses in this lab, and that somebody may have gotten infected, or in some way the virus escaped and got into the human population. Initially, the woman who runs the lab said, we weren't working on any coronavirus similar to COVID-19. And she also said that nobody from her lab got sick. Well, now we have this U.S. intelligence report that the Wall Street Journal first reported on, and that we have confirmed, that the U.S. government has identified through another foreign intelligence service, we're told, 3 researchers at the lab who sought hospital treatment for what is described as COVID-like symptoms, pneumonia-like symptoms. Now, we don't believe the U.S. government knows whether that was COVID, but what's interesting about it is, if it's true, it contradicts what the head of that Wuhan Institute of Virology said. So it raises questions about her credibility. So it's obviously not a smoking gun. It's one piece of circumstantial evidence. Then there's other pieces. There's, the State Department put out a fact sheet in January. It was the Trump administration on the way out the door, so it didn't get as much attention. But it also alleged that the Chinese military was doing secret experiments at that lab, which the lab folks have denied. So what you're seeing is a lot of scientists and people who had initially kind of downplayed the idea that there could have been an accidental release, wanting to take another look at it. And also in part because a year and a half later, they have not been able to identify an animal-to-human vector. Right. That doesn't mean they never will, but they haven't so far after a very intensive search.
I think you mentioned it, and it's the credibility issue that's really a big factor here. China has not been credible throughout this whole thing. Unfortunately, a team of researchers from the WHO went out to research. All the reports that we saw was that they were very limited in the scope of what they could look into. Even some of these scientists that signed on to the letter saying this definitely came from an animal, some of them are changing their tune. Everybody's just calling for more openness and more research into what's going on.
That's right, Oscar. And in fact, that WHO situation was pretty disheartening, because you had some very reputable scientists go over there for 3 days, and they visited the lab, but they didn't really have access to first-hand information. They weren't able to interview researchers, independently, and they emerged and said, not only did they say we don't believe in the lab theory, they said it doesn't merit further investigation. Well, immediately the head of the WHO contradicted them, because he has access, presumably, to some of the intelligence that the U.S. government has. And I'm sure phone calls were made, and the U.S. government's position was, wait a second, we can't rule this out. I mean, we're not saying we can prove it, or even that it's the leading theory. There are 2 essential theories: that this virus, naturally occurring, transmitted from bats to an animal host to humans, like other SARS viruses have done, or that there was this accidental lab theory. And the U.S. government's position is, we are examining both possibilities, and both merit investigation. And now you're right, you're seeing more. Even Anthony Fauci, who initially really kind of poo-pooed the lab theory, recently has been saying, no, I'm not ruling that out at all. Now, the problem, though, my U.S. intelligence sources tell me, is that at the end of the day, we may never know. If China continues to deny access to data, and they've purged databases, they've made it really difficult to get information. Obviously, the U.S. intelligence community is focusing resources on trying to find out. But even if they found, let's say the National Security Agency intercepted some what seemed like smoking gun emails, proving that, in fact, the Chinese were talking about a lab leak, they would be concerned at this point that that's disinformation, that the Chinese were trying to run an operation on them. And so it's really going to be difficult to find ground truth in this now, when we're having sort of a spy versus spy situation.
Definitely. And now what's kind of coming into focus, they're looking at this Chinese mine where 6 miners, I guess, got sick. This is stemming back to April of 2012. They were there. They were clearing bat guano from there. 3 of them died, but they all came down with this similar type of illness. And they went back there. They took a bunch of samples from there. They were able to identify several new coronaviruses. And you know, so this is one of those sticking points. Genetically, everything points to SARS-CoV-2, the one that causes COVID-19, coming from animals, something of a natural evolution. And these new coronaviruses are all similar, percentages of 60, 70% in some cases, similar to SARS-CoV-2, but they're not exactly the same. But just as we've been talking, everything just kind of comes together, and now people are focused on this. There's not enough information about that incident now, and people want to know what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. You know, the mine that you referred to, you know, where these miners got sick, the Wuhan Institute of Virology was called in to investigate that situation, and they took samples. And so, and this was, by the way, this wasn't the only, these were the only samples they were taking. They made a habit of going into caves and places where bats were to find SARS viruses, because they were studying those, and they brought them back to the lab. And the problem is, we don't know. They've said we didn't have a virus that was close to COVID-19, but we don't know that because the U.S. government hasn't had access to the data. And they haven't been able to interview the researchers. They haven't seen lab notes, the kind of things that a normal investigation would call for. And so it's really interesting that this lab was studying these viruses that are so close to COVID-19. In fact, they were also doing what's known as gain-of-function experiments, which make the viruses more contagious and more able to infect humans. Those are controversial. Some scientists think, you know, that those shouldn't be done because they're dangerous. They were working on it. And by the way, they're not doing this, again, they weren't doing this for some kind of bioweapon, as far as we know. They were doing this to try to learn about coronaviruses, to develop vaccines and prevent them from spreading. But if there was an accident, the world needs to know that, because it has implications for how we would respond, how we understand this pandemic, and certainly should be a warning to China that it needs to get its house in order in terms of its lab safety and security.
Yeah, it's just an interesting position. This far along, we have vaccines that are already fighting against the virus, and when it comes to the origins, we have more questions than we've started with. So still something we're going to be hearing a lot about until we hopefully get some type of answers. And as you mentioned, we may never know. So we'll keep monitoring all of that. Ken Dilanian, National Security Correspondent at NBC News, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Oscar. Great to be with you.
You're listening to the Daily Dive Weekend Edition on KFI AM 640 and everywhere in the iHeartRadio app. I'll be back with some more top stories from the week, but first, let's get an update from the KFI newsroom.
KFI News on the hour, on the half, and when it breaks.
I'm Brian Bruman from the KFI 24-hour newsroom. A funeral has been held for 6-year-old Aiden Leos, who was shot and killed in a road rage attack on the 55 freeway in Orange last month. Aiden's mother said even though Aiden's life was cut way too short,
I thank God for allowing us to have the beautiful memories that we were given with him. I will always remember nothing but pure innocence, love, and unbelievable kindness as I hold you in my heart.
There's a $500,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the shooter, who was riding in what police believe was a white VW Golf sport wagon with untinted windows. Dozens of earthquakes have jolted Imperial County by the Salton Sea. The biggest was a 5.3 magnitude that hit around 11 a.m. yesterday, 6 miles outside Calipatria. Aftershocks have ranged from about 2.5 to 3.7. SoCal weather from KFI brought to you by Indeed.com. Patches of drizzle under cloudy skies. Lows are in the 60s. We lead local from the KFI 24-hour newsroom. I'm Brian Bruman.
Checking KFI traffic, we do have a crash in San Bernardino, 15 southbound to 215. That connector road to the 215 south is shut down due to a crash investigation. Newfound Valley, full closure of the 405 north from Brookhurst to Warner. All lanes shut down until 8:30 a.m. And road work continues in the Corona area, 15 southbound from Ontario Avenue to El Cerrito. The 2 right lanes coned off until 6 a.m. KFI in the Sky helps get you there faster. I'm Jonathan Weiss.
Not to be a backseat driver, but if you need to hire great people fast, you need Indeed. Sponsor a job, and you'll immediately get a list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description. More at Indeed.com/credit.
I know you've seen all those great home loans being advertised, but you're probably not sure if you qualify, or maybe you've been told, nope, you can't get that low rate. Well, I bet you haven't called IntelliLoan. Right now, IntelliLoan has a 1.99% rate in APR with no points or lender fees for SoCal residents, and this is even if your credit score is as low as 620. It's a 1.99% rate in APR with no points and no lender fees. And you've heard me talk about Daryl, the owner of IntelliLoan. He's got a team of home loan specialists that really want to make this home loan process not suck. They want to make it as hassle-free as possible for you. So call IntelliLoan today at 1-800-918-6200. That's 1-800-918-6200, or just go to IntelliLoan.com.
Rates subject to change without notice. Minimum loan amount requirements apply. 60% loan to value and 620 FICO credit score. Certain restrictions apply. Subject to credit approval. NMLS 3290. Loans made or arranged pursuant to a California Finance Lenders Law License number 6036970. Equal housing lender. IntelliLoan. Borrow smart.
Wendy's Frosticino is cold brew with frosty creamer. So wake up with a breakfast baconator, seasoned potatoes, and a little frosty in your coffee. And make your good morning great, because Wendy's Frosticino is cold brew with frosty creamer. Choose wisely. Choose Wendy's. A participating U.S. Wendy's.
Find the employees you need to get your business moving. Sign up with iHeartAdBuilder.com and create a custom radio ad to reach job seekers listening to stations just like this one. Get started today at iHeartAdBuilder.com.
Hi, this is Big Game James Worthy. Before I was a Hall of Fame basketball player, I played basketball at the Boys and Girls Club. So I'm proud to be partnering with Ford to help them make people's lives better in the communities they serve. The Ford Fund is investing in education and community programs in Southern California to support at-risk middle school students. But that's only the start. Learn more about what the Ford Fund is doing around the world today at fordfund.org.
KFI AM 640.
An iHeart radio station.
24-hour news. More stimulating talk.
This is KFI AM 640, heard everywhere on the iHeart Radio app. I'm Oscar Ramirez, and you're listening to the Daily Dive Weekend Edition. On the coronavirus front, we've had some concerning news for those with immunocompromised systems. A recent study found that vaccines are proving less effective for them than for those with normal immune systems. 46% of transplant patients had no antibodies after 2 vaccine shots, and the other 54% who did develop antibodies were at lower levels. For more on why booster shots might be needed for immunocompromised people, we'll speak to Joe Barrett, senior Midwest correspondent at the Wall Street Journal.
People with compromised immune systems always have a little bit less of an uptake of vaccines, from what I understand, but it was really stark with the COVID vaccines. The study that came out in April showed that only about 46% of people who hadn't gotten 2 shots had actually gotten any antibodies, and the people who actually did get antibodies got less than a person with a normal immune system. So there were people out there who had gotten 2 shots and basically thought they were covered, like everybody else, but it turns out many of them aren't, and you needed to do additional testing to figure out how much immunity you have and, whether you got any at all.
There's about 10 million people in the U.S. that take immunosuppressants for various conditions. So that's a lot of people that might know somebody in their lives that have an immunocompromised system. The CDC has basically said that they should operate as if they weren't even vaccinated. That's how much they don't really know about this. And that's the big question is what to do. They're trying to explore options right now for how to proceed, how to get them those antibodies.
Right, yeah. Some people, consulting with their doctors are going out and getting another booster shot, but the CDC says that really needs more study. I mean, they just don't want to send people off when they're not 100% sure what the reaction is going to be. Apparently, there's sort of a, theoretical risk that it could cause organ rejection. I mean, I think that, theoretical means relatively remote, but they want to do these studies just to make sure that it's safe for people, and then and that it's effective. Is it worth it for them to actually get this extra shot or not?
Right, and obviously the way everything works out, that organ is more important than the vaccine would be. You need to take care of that to help complete the body system more than you would need these vaccines. So that's kind of the tough spot to be in. You did speak to few people who are in this situation, and one of them specifically, he was a man who went out and got another shot, and his antibody levels did shoot up.
Yeah, apparently, anecdotally, this is working for some people, but they really haven't tested it enough to be sure that it's going to kind of work for everybody. But they have even talked about, well, if the third one doesn't work, you could even possibly get a fourth one if it's proving that this is safe. There's also possible benefit from going, say you had Pfizer or Moderna, going what they call cross-platform and having your next shot be a Johnson & Johnson, like that might spur a reaction that's different than what the other one did. And so, there's a lot of options out there, but sort of the CDC in its guidance is being, very cautious.
And the thought, obviously, is that it is that cocktail of drugs that is doing something to the vaccine that's causing the antibodies not to form.
Yeah, people on, who have had transplants, that's about 500,000 of the 10 million who take immunosuppressants. They take like more than one. And I guess some of the immunosuppressants are stronger or make the vaccine even less effective than other ones. So there are some people with lupus who might be taking one of the drugs that the transplant patients take, and their chance of getting antibodies is just as low or even lower than people with the transplants. Anyways, it's kind of a complicated picture, but the transplant people take often more than one, and so they're sort of the biggest group that's sort of at risk for this all in one lump.
And so has there been a recommendation for people who take immunosuppressants to go and get tested for antibodies to see what their levels are like right now?
Well, I don't think the testing is very widely available at the moment, but they do recommend that people talk to their doctors, and their doctors are certainly going to tell them to, wear extra PPE, don't act like you can take that mask off